A group of men clad in white coats were working tirelessly. And in front of me was a moving miniature train. This was what you called a model train, though it was still large enough for an adult to ride on it. Yo, young master. Did that surprise you? It was none other than Cajun. He was acting chief director, and he had on a rather unfitting white lab coat. The hall was roughly the same size as a university auditorium, and the ground was marked with railways, making it impossible for people to stand around. There's models of mountains, valleys, and tunnels here were made for aerodynamic analysis. Indeed. As expected from young master to have seen through their purposes right away. Honestly, the impressive thing here is all of the talented researchers that have gathered in our nation. They managed to build such an amazing facility with ease. Indeed, Cajun had a point. It was thanks to the engineers' collaboration that this groundbreaking facility had been created. This three-dimensional model was created using magic. Cajun made the masterpiece of a prototype train, currently running along on the track, and it was one of his best works yet. What's powering this train? I could have deciphered it using Raphael Sensei's analyze and assess, but I asked about it on purpose. Steam Cajun replied with a grin. I nodded in response. It was just as I thought. Right now, horses provided the physical power for trains operating within our nation. There had been proposals for either golems or monsters to drag trains around, but these proposals ultimately could not solve the root of the problem. The key was to develop a locomotive. And its primary source of power was the steam engine. Of course, it wouldn't use old-world technology like burning coal. Rather, we tried to create an engine that utilized both the strengths of magic and science. This was why we named it the Magitrain. The concept behind the magic engine was using magic to convert magicules into an energy source, which then provided the combustion energy that gave rise to steam. This was the basic magical mechanism. Perhaps this prototype could be called the Spirit Magic Core. Even though it was a simple design, it still required sophisticated magical technology. The laws that magic obeyed were drastically different than those that governed the natural world. It was difficult trying to observe any patterns from the former, due to its ability to grant effects purely by imagination. For instance, let's say there was a lit candle inside a transparent glass container. The enclosed space would quickly consume oxygen and produce a high concentration of carbon dioxide. With that being said, the magic here purely referred to elemental magic. Spirit magic, which could be cast by borrowing the power of spirits, would not be manipulated by a mage's imagination. By the way, during my battle with Ifrit in the past, Great Sage had warned me about causing a steam explosion. The reason why it could have potentially worked was because Ifrit's flames obeyed the same properties as fire in the natural world. Had it been elemental magic, which alters the laws of physics using magicules, my strategy undoubtedly wouldn't have worked. This was the same reason why I could use spirit magic while inside the holy purification barrier. There was one more thing. In order to illuminate the cave inside, I once used engraving magic to heat up metal, yet the light generated proved insufficient. Thus, I had Dold work on it, and he changed it to another spell. Apparently, he devised a method of directly converting magicules into light by applying elemental magic. Thanks to magic, there were some processes that could be completely bypassed for results. I was more shocked at their technological capabilities as they were able to recreate steam engines solely from my explanations. All in all, there are a lot of methods to power it. For instance, using pistons, turbines, and steam. Basically, it's using thermal energy to do either mechanical work or converting it into electricity. That will be our field of research in the future. It appears that the research in the piston mechanism is going rather smoothly, I commented. Ah, you're right, young master. If we can figure out how to work with electricity, then we can produce a great deal of power, agreed Cajun, turning to the small train. Cajun was gazing at the locomotive that had 6 trains attached to it. Each one was carrying some iron ingots. If this was the real deal, then it was capable of transporting a huge amount of weight efficiently. In this lab, we can recreate all sorts of different environments. We are currently in the tropical rainforest, but the room next door is the desert region. The room next to that is currently simulating a snowy region. We collect data individually from each room, so that we can design trains for each environment. Ramiris, who at some point had flown onto trainee Sand's shoulders, described with a smile. Even one of the vampires, with his shiny fangs, nodded vigorously after hearing this. It's truly wonderful that Moi and the others are of some help. Moi loves these types of experiments. This happy-go-lucky guy was a bit of a weirdo. By the way, the paper was made of plant fibers. We could get more supplies if we started trading with the Eastern Empire, but right now, we did not have any trade interaction. Under these circumstances, I had asked them to start by researching paper. Back to the topic of the important notes I was given. There were a lot of questions, proposed solutions, experiments, and their subsequent outcomes. It was all very intriguing. All of this data could be used as reference when we eventually built a full-scale locomotive. I hurriedly sped through everything, and it seemed that all the relevant theories had been completed. Given the aforementioned information, we could actually start crafting a prototype A, could it be? Oi, Veldora, when you mentioned prototype, could it be that you weren't referring to the model train, but something else? Kukuku, how impressive. You really know your stuff to have noticed that. Veldora laughed happily. Ramiris, now sitting on his shoulder, had a smug look as well. I glanced around the room and realized that all the researchers, Trainee San and Beretta, all had the same expressions. Before I knew it, they had gathered and lined up next to a certain door. In that case, Cajun began to explain as he slowly walked towards that door. We went through a lot of trouble making it. Turns out summoning a fire spirit in the engine alone was not enough. We needed to control the power output and had to have actual workers stationed nearby. Therefore, each locomotive would need to be staffed with a qualified mage. We could start to train mages based on the number of trains planned for manufacture, but it would take too much time. That's why we decided to build and install magic circuits in the train to automatically regulate it. The fire spirit, which is the engine's core, and the control panel engraved with engraving magic that controls it. Everything came together to give you the finished product. He offhandedly mentioned about summoning spirits, but the process proved to be a major hindrance. Because lower spirits lacked enough power, mid-tier spirits, such as fire salamanders, had to be summoned at the very least. A salamander's power could reach up to rank B+, which was impossible for any average person to summon. Is it because Ramiris is here after all? It likely had to do with the fact that she used to be the queen of spirits. It seemed that anything spirit-related was a piece of cake for her. As I was left shocked, Cajun put his hand on the door handle. Oh, this is. It was past the door. It had a black, shiny, and somehow majestic appearance. It was clearly made of magisteel, but at the same time, it looked like a steel monster that gave off a dangerous aura. While feeling impressed, I heard Vesta's proud declaration. This is the culmination of our technologies, Magitrain Zero. I was under the impression that it was still in the experimental phase, yet there it was, completed. And even if it was just a prototype, this was the train that I dreamt of. We managed to take one big first step forward. We will likely be testing the durability of the train's body. Not only do we plan to make freight cars, but also passenger cars, resting cars and dining cars. Honestly speaking, even the locomotive itself isn't finished yet. I'm trying to refine certain details and make it more complete. Vesta and Cajun were both filled with motivation as they spoke. All the researchers were ardently gazing at Magitrain Zero, so I guess there was still room for improvement. There's also the electricity Rimuru mentioned. That one was a bit difficult. I had a wind spirit summoned to generate electricity, though we weren't able to use that energy directly. That was to be expected. While electricity was indeed a versatile resource, it was also exceedingly difficult to control. First, we will need to develop batteries. Once we succeed, we will be able to utilize the locomotive's excess thermal energy to generate electricity. If we manage to do that, it will broaden the possibilities to make the train ride more comfortable. It's definitely worth trying. While I barely understood anything on the matter, Raphael-sensei had translated my memoirs of technological textbooks from Earth into the local language, and then transcribed everything for me. I then handed the consolidated book to Vesta, assured that he was going to put them to good use. It felt like the secondary use of it through magic, but it was very convenient. Indeed, that's how it is. I wanted to bring this up when you mentioned electricity back there, but in the end, I decided to do it after you saw it for yourself. After all, seeing is believing. Let's take a look. Could it be that they've already put electricity to practical use? With this thought in mind, I followed Cajun. I climbed in and was immediately met with surprise. The inside of the locomotive was enveloped in a gentle halo of light. I turned to Cajun and conveyed with my eyes, "What's this about?" By the time young master handed me the data, I had already made my decision. Didn't you too, Vesta? Of course. When Ramiris-sama handed the research regarding the application of electricity to us, Cajun Dono and I studied the materials in detail. Even though there are still parts that I don't understand, with all these researchers under one roof, we were able to utilize everyone's wisdom. Well, that's right. Everyone helped answer our questions and doubts. And, when I saw the elemental colossus of that little girl there, Ramiris-sama, I was truly surprised. A working product of our abandoned armored soldier project right in front of me. Cajun recalled. Indeed, that was the case. If you had the real thing right in front of you, obviously you would get a better understanding of how it worked. Right now, another elemental colossus was being built and was supposed to become a subject of research. Exactly. As I read that book and heeded varying opinions, I realized that we had a serious misinterpretation. Back then, we experimented under the belief that elemental magic and spirit magic were the same kind of magic. That was the source of our mistakes. So then, we deduced what we were lacking by investigating with the elemental colossus in front of us. What became clear with those results was that the law of magic completely changed depending on the magic. As for Ramiris's elemental Colossus, instead of spirit magic, the summoned spirit itself was being used. Because Cajun and the researchers tried to move the spirit magic core with elemental magic, they failed to initiate a chain reaction, and thus wasn't operating properly. And yet, I ended up increasing the magic output. The result, the magic heat had nowhere to go, eventually grew out of control, and the experiment ended in a failure. I see, it was that kind of thing. In Ramiris's case, there was a possibility that she simply couldn't use elemental magic, and thus her elemental Colossus reflected that. But, as a result, that became the key to success. The elemental Colossus's power reactor was the spirit magic core, but as engineers gathered en masse, they seemed to have found a way to fully realize its performance capabilities. And by analyzing my master core, the original spirit magic core was completed. I feel both happy and frustrated. Yes, I wholly agree. To think that the theory we once gave up on was only due to a misunderstanding. In other words, this train was powered by a fully completed spirit magic core. By giving magicules to spirits of various attributes, they would then convert the magicules into a more easily usable energy. After all, electricity wasn't that great if it was high voltage. Not only did we need power plants, but also substations and a battery storage facility to actually hold the charge. To think all that such a complicated process was handled solely by the spirit magic core. Moreover, with magicules already in the atmosphere, fuel wasn't that big of a concern. If the concentration wasn't high enough, all you needed to do was prepare magic stones, which were simple enough to carry around. It was like a dream come true. Come on, Rimuru, aren't you surprised? We're like this when we get serious. Although it irritated me seeing Veldora and Ramiris brag like that, what they had achieved was admittedly astonishing. For now, let's just honestly praise them. No, it's amazing. Keep up the good work. Leave it to us. Just relax. I could understand Veldora and Ramiris's feeling of wanting to boast because I, too, felt like boasting to someone. The day that trains began running through our country was drawing closer, and it wouldn't be long before the Magitrain spread across the world. I couldn't help but feel excited. So, sir, I have one thing I wanted to discuss with you. Yes, what is it? No, you see, I wish to organize a little get-together to celebrate the completion of Magitrain Zero. So, you know. I see, it's a get-together in name, but what you really want is to eat, drink and play to your heart's content, right? I couldn't exactly say no, so we wound up at one of my favorite nightclubs. Well, whatever. Alright. Let's drink the night away. Thank you so much. The high-class bar is a place that Your Honor manages, so I couldn't just rent it out as I once said Cajun, smiling with anticipation. That place certainly wasn't the kind of establishment where we could visit in large groups and make a lot of noise. But even before that, we wouldn't have been able to fit this many people inside anyway. For Cajun, it wasn't about the money either. I'll have them get you a seat outside the restaurant as well. We'll turn away the other customers for this evening, and hold a recognition of service party for the research employees here. Thankfully, this was a city of elves famous for its pleasure gardens. Let's all share the joy we feel and nourish our spirits for the future. Pure ha ha ha. The conversation is flowing well. Thank you for the food, Your Majesty Rimuru. Going along with Veldora, who was in a good mood, the researchers promptly showed their gratitude with a bow. It was such a unified movement that it made me wonder if they had regularly practiced it. Also, the vampires apparently didn't need fresh blood, judging by the fact that they were enjoying the alcohol too. They took part in it like it was natural. And apart from that, this is exciting. I too get to drink alcohol for free today. Oh my, that's great. But please be careful not to drink too much. No, Ramiris-sama. I have been ordered by Ramiris-sama to prohibit children from drinking. Attempting to use the hustle and bustle as a distraction, the little fairy tried to sneak a drink, but was prevented in the end, of course.